let's learn something really quick.
If you got the time, absolutely. And you got the discipline, there's no question about it.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great practice to put into your everyday life, you guys.
You generally regret the things you don't do, not the things you did do. Let me say it that way.
Mic drop. This was just awesome. I love meeting my guests in person, and it's a whole nother animal, and the energy is just electric. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bring you incredible guests from all over the world, so sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is a professional author, and she is the founder of the Leadership Literary Lab. Please welcome Mary Lynn Cloghesy.
Hello.
So you actually focus on helping people write fiction novels.
Actually, the truth is I'm a fiction writer, but my business is based on helping nonfiction authors because I work with experts in their fields. Being somebody who has a long history in business, I felt that there's a lot of programs out there that don't necessarily serve the needs of those that have a lot of experience and a lot of thought leadership to offer. And so I wanted to raise the bar in terms of how they can get their messages pulled together and into the market, and B, to create an efficient program that best serves their needs. So I write fiction, but I teach nonfiction.
Now, I hear in today's world, in order to really stand out, it's important to have a published book. If you are in leadership or like a figure like myself or someone that has a message, like it really gives you a lot more credibility.
Yeah, so people see authors as having instant authority. And in fact, that's the name of my newsletter, Instant Authority. And so it's a question of making sure that when you do create that book, it best reflects your knowledge and your perspective, and that it's not just, pardon the language, but a quick and dirty, if you will, because then that can undermine your bigger picture and your longer term goals.
Yeah.
So quality is the key.
Sure. Well, I think quality with anything is the key. I mean, you could throw anything together and throw it at the wall and see if it sticks, but that's not always a good plan. I've talked to people on the show that it's taken them like 8 to 10 years to write a book.
Yeah, it can. It depends on which part of your career you're in. It depends on sort of those benchmark moments that kind of redefine or set the trajectory for where you want to go. I mean, when I work with clients, one of the things I do is I talk about the big picture. So where do you want to be in a year from now, in 5 years from now? How will this book fit into that vision? Because it is a lot of time and effort, and there is a financial component to it. So if you're going to invest in your book and in your story, then you need to have a very clear picture of how that best serves your interest. It is evergreen. So once you do decide that you're going to write a book, it will represent you in your thought process for a long time. And so make sure that you're ready. And when you are ready, do it well.
Yeah. And so now you don't help with the publication of the book. You just help them, just give them a roadmap on how to complete a book.
I can offer advice on the different publication pathways, but once the manuscript is complete, I will either do one of two things: help you write a book proposal. Sometimes we even start with that because you need to have a rock solid proposal to attract an agent. It's very difficult and there's tons of competition. And or have a query letter where you can go directly to some of the smaller printers, but they might have imprints, which means there's niche markets and niche support available for your market. Yeah. So it doesn't end at the manuscript, right? But I then sort of move you on to experts in their fields in those avenues.
Yeah, I actually I've been told, obviously, to write a book multiple times, and I'm like, oh my gosh, add that on to everything else that I'm doing. Like, it just makes my head want to explode because it's such a commitment, and I see the value in it. I love reading books. I have like a mini library myself, and I definitely hope to accomplish that one day. I really do. But I had talked to a professor out of the East Coast, I think, and she was talking about, this is a while ago, probably 2 years ago, I had her on the show, about how like a good way to format a letter or format your book or whatever to send it to the publications to get it published. And she was very specific in how she would help people. She didn't charge for it. That wasn't like what she did. She was just like, oh, well, here's, I'm helping. She actually published a lot of books like yourself. Right. I think it's very interesting in today's world with all the technology that we have, and that you have so many different avenues to actually publish a book. they can use someone like you. They can use like something like Google search or Canva or Amazon, because I think a lot of people can self-publish through Amazon, I believe.
Yeah, there's I think it's something like 11 million books a day or something like that. It's a crazy big number. And so that's one of the reasons that the big vision is so important, because an author platform is definitely part of it. If you're a fiction author, you don't necessarily need to have, quote unquote, a following or an audience pre-established for your book. But with nonfiction, you do. They're looking to see how they can create a business proposition that's mutually beneficial out of your writing. And so that's one of the reality checks that I ask my clients to consider. Are you willing to support this book after the manuscript is completed? Because really, that's a major benchmark, but it's only the beginning. And so when you're looking at doing a book project, it depends on how you're going to use it. Some people simply put it on their websites or in their social media as a lead magnet. So I differentiate a non-fiction book, if you will, from a lead magnet, and they both have their value. A lead magnet's a lot shorter, and you can do it a lot quicker. A full nonfiction book, if you want to compete with the best out there, that's going to take you at least 9 to 12 months. And you're going to have to do your homework and do some research and, create the structure and use the rhetorical strategies that will help that stand out. So there's a lot of pieces to it. And that's why I really like what I do, because I can give you the broad strokes, and then you can see where you fit in that spectrum of how is this going to serve you and how can you best apply your time and knowledge and resources to that end.
Is it easier for a wannabe author or an author to be successful writing a fiction book versus a nonfiction book?
No, it's different. And so the difference is that there's a lot of gatekeepers to fiction. Just to give you context, Harry Potter was rejected 200 times before an agent picked it up. So you really have to be able to have a level of resilience that's a little different than with a nonfiction author. Because in some ways, a nonfiction author has more control over their career. You can self-publish as a fiction author, but if you want to hit the distribution channels and be in the bookstores and get the visibility that a fiction author that has a large publishing house behind them would get, then, that's a big ask. And so there's a lot of critical decision points to be made along the way. One of the big questions I ask, whether it's talking to my cohort and my friends in fiction or talking to my clients in nonfiction, is what makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
What makes you happy? Where do you want to spend your time? How will this book serve you? Because for some people, it's just getting it out of them. It's just having that book written, knowing it exists. For other people, they want to take it all the way. They want to be a TED Talk, guest. They want to be a household name. And that's for both. So there's ways in which fiction and nonfiction can learn from each other and can support each other. But they are different pathways, and some of the critical decision points along the way happen at different times.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what about, and I haven't really talked about this with someone like yourself on the show before, people that use or utilize a ghostwriter. Now, I've heard this term, and there are different people that offer that kind of service.
Yeah.
How does that serve someone who wants to be an author?
So when I started my career, I was a business-to-business marketing person, and so I was a ghostwriter for many years. Okay. So how that would look, I'll give you an example. I'd sit in the office of, say, an oil and gas president who grew up in the field. They kind of were working on the rigs from the time they were in their teens, and they created this big, successful company, but they don't necessarily have the academic background, nor do they have a comfort with the written word. So I would interview them. And at the time, it was tape recorders, that kind of aging myself. But I'd interview them, and then I'd distill their message down to the key points, and then I'd write in a voice that was very corporate and very professional, but that the message was honed in and they would get behind it. So ghostwriters can be really valuable people. It depends, but there's a huge price point for authors that want to hire ghostwriters, because essentially you're co-writing your book. And that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of sort of exchange that goes back and forth. And you need to find the right person for your book. Same thing with an editor. You have to find the right person for your book. They understand your message. They understand the tone of your message. They understand your target audience. All these things matter because there is a reader-grader relationship. And so these are some of the complexities that we discuss in my program, and that I work with my clients on, figuring out who they are, what they need, how they best can get their message across, the tone that serves them, the structure that serves them. And so these are some of the complexities that, when you have these programs that say, write your book in 30 days or write your book in 4 months, you kind of gloss over them. And really, in a market that is as competitive as it is today, you really need to step up your game to make sure that you're competing at the highest level.
Absolutely. I mean, 11 million books released per day. That's a lot of books.
I might have that number wrong. I heard that at a conference this summer, so don't hold me to that. But yes, it is a vast volume of books.
Well, still, let's just say it's half of that or a quarter of that. That's still a lot of book every day.
It is.
Just to be able to get to release it and to get it in front of people when there's so much out there to pull attention away from your book, you really have got to have a strong brand behind the book and a strong message.
That strong brand, a strong message, and communicate it well, and pick a format and a strategy that's going to speak to your people, right? Yeah. I mean, you've got simple decisions like, do you speak in first person? I think this and I think that, or do you speak in third person? Right? Wow. Depends on your audience, depends on how you're using it. Third person being this happened and then that happened, so it's less personal, of course.
Yeah. And I heard that you don't write a book to make money. You write a book just to establish yourself as the authority. And I heard that from someone that actually did write a book for themselves. And they said it was more of, and I had a gentleman on the show that actually he's got his own TV show on NBC in Vegas. And so he's very well known in Asia. And he puts people through media training to be on TV with him. And he just says that he will not have anybody on his TV show unless they've written a book, because it establishes them as an authority aside from everything else that they do. But I found that very interesting, and I always had the impression, and I think a lot of people do, that you write a book to make money, and that's just not the case anymore.
You know, writing a book is a long-term proposition. You can make money, but you have to have a multi-pronged plan. It's like saying, I have this little diamond that I have inside me that I want to share with everybody, but if nobody sees it, and nobody can see it sparkle, and nobody kind of sort of can see it glint in the sunlight. I mean, that's a small metaphor. Maybe it's not the right metaphor, but you have to be visible. And in order to even show up in those places to be visible, you have to bring the diamond with you. So
diamond in the rough, make sure it's shining, shine it up. So let's talk about your program. If somebody was listening to this and they're like, okay, I really connect with Mary Lynn. I like what she's saying, and I would trust her with this process. So typically, what does that look like when they reach out to you, and how long is that engagement for? Because as we know, it can take a long time to write a book. But with your program, does that help shorten the process?
So it does. I mean, the first thing that I do differently is I've worked personally with all my authors. I don't outsource any of the work, because I want to get hands-on and eyes-on to help them fast track it. So my program's delivered in 4 different phases. And it kind of depends. Some people come to me with partially written manuscripts, but I'll tell you the 4 phases so that you can have a quick idea of how it works. The first 2 phases, we don't start on the manuscript, which is a unique feature of mine. The first one is preparation, and it's really about helping people see themselves as an author, understand what that takes, and start to develop the chops so that they can write regularly. So I do a lot of free writing. I do a lot of habit stacking. I do a lot of beta testing in terms of, well, let's figure out what schedule and what capacity you have. And then from there, I'll do the pacing charts. So I'm like, okay, if in your genre, you need this many words to kind of be competitive and to attract an agent, if that's what you want, and or to self-publish, then we back out the number of months that it's going to take to write it with fresh pages and revisions. So there's a lot of preparation that happens. And then the pre-writing is some of the stuff we referred to. So for example, we choose structured and rhetorical strategies, and I'll explain what that is. The easiest explanation is a recipe. So in a cookbook, you'll see a picture, and then you'll have a little description, and then you'll have a list of ingredients, and then you'll have a list directions as to show you how to do it. That's an extremely efficient layering of rhetorical strategies to help you get to the final result, right?
Yeah.
In the same way, we need to look at a nonfiction book and say, well, do you need anecdotal evidence? So not only your own story, but stories from clients or stories from people that you've engaged with.
Yeah.
Do you need research? Do you need scientific research? Do you need to pull quotes from other people who are more established in your field? Some of the philosophical quotes or things of that nature. So we work through all the rhetorical strategies, and at the end of the pre-writing phase, we have a solid outline to work with. I don't tell people that they're married to it, but we have not only what you're writing, but how you're writing it and how long it's going to take. So they have these benchmarks, and they have expectations set around how long and the progress points that will help encourage them as they move along. We also talk about derailers and how to pre-manage those strategies, because at some point in the middle of a book, everybody will be disillusioned. It's just a normal part of the process.
Yeah.
And then the third part of the process is the actual writing of the manuscript. And there's a lot of back and forth that happens in that. I do deliver what I call craft-based lessons. So that's about the technical stuff, like watch for changes in voice. A lot of times new writers will go from first to second to third person. We'll have to kind of backtrack.
Probably be that way.
Yeah, it's very common. And also verb tense, things like that, where they're switching tense depending on where they are in their story. So we need to kind of create a structure that's coherent and cohesive. And so those are the things that I'll look for and sort of help them to move it along. And then the fourth phase is really more about learning on the part of the client, where it's like, okay, do I want to self-publish or not? Do I want to go into the market, and how does this serve me? We kind of circle back to the beginning, but also, I'll ask questions like, do you want to run a beta test? And if they do, then I'll give them resources to run the beta test. So throughout this program, we're working one-on-one, but I also have a grouping of resources that they can access as they go along to kind of learn it as they go. And then I'll teach them a little bit about a launch primer, and then I'll sort of help them find their way forward out of the program into the next phases.
I love it. It's very, very structured, and it seems very like it helps keep them on task.
Yeah, there's accountability, and there's a process, and then that step-by-step process is really reassuring, I think. I know that, when I can direct clients, even if they fall off in terms of their timing and their schedule, they know there's a way to come back on. They know there's a next step to take, right?
Sure. So what's the average, like with people that you work with, average time frame from like step 1 to step 4 or completion?
6 to 9 months is fast tracking. 9 to 12 on if they're working full time, they have other obligations and children and lives and things of that nature. So 6 to 12, but honestly, probably more 9 to 12. I was just thinking 6 to 9 because I have a client that's moving into a book. She actually earned a traditional contract, which is one of the things that I'm very proud of. So my early clients have been attracting agents, which is great.
Congratulations. That's awesome. But that's still pretty quick, I feel like, with a lot of people I've talked to that have written books. I mean, it's taken them years.
It can take years. And sometimes it's important to take that first manuscript and put it away for a while and revisit it down the road. So I do prepare authors for the fact that they might not want to rush out to publish it, because once you publish, that will be your story. People will know you for that. So make sure you give it time to digest, right? To ruminate on it, let it sit for a little while.
So how many people do you typically work with at a time?
I only work with 4 at a time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's very limited. And then are you real picky about the people that you work with?
I'm picky to the extent that they have to be committed to the project and they have to know what they're talking about. So if I have somebody that comes to me and I don't feel their thought leadership is quite seasoned yet, then I might suggest they go spend more time kind of sorting themselves out. And I hope that doesn't come off as being a egotistical comment, but it's really to the sort of self-preservation on their part, because, young people need time to grow and learn. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just very wise, and it's great advice. You being a fiction writer, do you ever get inspiration by some of the people that you work with?
I get inspiration all the time from all the people in all kinds of places. It's personalities, it's different career paths, it's how people fall off the wagon and they come back on. It's everything is fodder for great fiction.
Yeah. I think I find, like I said before we started recording, I find it fascinating. I used to love reading fiction when I was younger, and I'm more into like self-help, more like, just personal development these days at this point in my life. But I'm just like that whole process and being able to create a world that allows someone to kind of disconnect from reality and just be so immersed in the pages that you yourself write and create. I think it's such an incredible talent and such a gift that I could never wrap my head around doing that personally.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. That's why I separate the fiction from the nonfiction, because the fiction is my fun, creative place where I can allow my mind to kind of roam free. And I write paranormal murder mysteries, so it's
cool.
It's a very different field from what I do professionally. But there's a lot of ability in paranormal to write dream sequences and to skew reality and to just stretch my creative muscles a bit. And so I really enjoy that part of it.
And how many books have you written?
I've got 2. I've got 3 in the works right now. I've got 2. One that's under consideration with multiple agents, and fingers crossed it'll go forward. Another one I've stopped to pivot on one of the themes of it, but so I'm kind of midway through. I'm about 2/3 of the way through that, but I'm going to backtrack and add a little bit more of it. I'm going to call it to the central storyline. So I'm not in a hurry with the fiction. I love the fiction. I love being part of that world. I have been a presenter at conferences and on panels and moderated, and so it's a really fun world to be part of, and I'm just happy to be one among them.
It's amazing. Mary Lynn, where can people find you, connect with you, and learn more about working with you and your incredible fiction books?
Right. So I have 2 different websites because the fiction and nonfiction are quite different. If you'd like to connect with me on fiction, I am building my Substack list. I do a blog once a month. I don't pepper your inbox. And that's under my name, MaryLynnCloghesy.com. If you'd like to sign up for that, I will be offering a writer's camp sometime in the next month. Pardon me, I'm putting information out in the next month for likely the spring or summer of 2025 in the Canadian Rockies. And so it'll be like a hiking writing retreat.
Cool.
So that's one part. And then if you're interested in the literary lab, you can find me at leadershipliterarylab.com. I do offer free consultations. We can do a half an hour meeting. We can chat over email, but you will get me directly and you will get an AI or an assistant. So Leadership Literary Lab for the nonfiction side of my business.
Excellent. You guys, we put those links in the show notes. So if you are interested in learning more about working with Mary Lynn, go click the link, or to check out her fiction novels, go click that link and reach out. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you, even just have a conversation to see if it would be a good fit. Mary Lynn, this is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
Your concept is label free. And one of the things that I love about this concept is that I encourage all men and women who are listening to live label free. I mean, we don't need to subscribe to those pre-designed boxes that we're all put in. That's one of the reasons I write the paranormal murder mysteries, because there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of mystery in the world. And I believe that when we don't label people, we're able to sort of see them for who they truly are and, dive into more of the mystery of those around us in this beautiful world that we live in. So those are my words.
I love that. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Mary Lynn, what a pleasure. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience is going to learn a lot from this as well. And it makes me even want to move the needle a little bit more towards starting that book. But thank you so much for sharing what you do and how you are different and can help people get to the finish line when it comes to writing their book.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with some more dynamic guests.